The spice trade, one of the most significant drivers of global exploration and empire building, reshaped the world in ways that still resonate today. Spices, particularly pepper, cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, and later tea and coffee, were among the most coveted commodities in Europe, prized not only for their culinary uses, but also for their medicinal properties, preservative qualities, and status symbols of wealth. Spanning across millennia, the quest for control of the spice trade fueled exploration, ignited wars, and altered the course of history. The history of the spice trade stretches back to antiquity. The trade routes that connected Europe, the Middle East, India, and Southeast Asia are some of the oldest in human history, dating back at least to the early civilizations of Mesopotamia and Egypt. Spices, particularly from India and Southeast Asia, were transported along the ancient Silk Road and maritime routes to the Mediterranean and other parts of the world. In the early centuries, spices were often transported overland by Arab and Persian traders, who controlled the lucrative spice routes to the Middle East. From there, Venetian merchants were the dominant force in distributing these spices throughout Europe. Spices became a valuable luxury item, often costing more than gold in weight. The lucrative trade contributed to the rise of powerful trading hubs, including Venice and Alexandria, creating a monopoly that generated incredible wealth for a select few. At the heart of the spice trade lay the fabled Spice Islands, or the Moluccas, part of modern-day Indonesia, the source of many of the most sought-after spices like cloves, nutmeg, and mace. Other regions in Southeast Asia, such as Sri Lanka and India, provided cinnamon and pepper. Pepper, in particular, became known as black gold because of its immense value in European markets. These remote islands were steeped in mystery, and Europeans knew little about them, except for the fantastic wealth they generated. For centuries, Arab, Indian, and Chinese merchants dominated the trade routes, keeping the exact locations of the Spice Islands a secret from European traders. This shroud of mystery only heightened Europe's hunger for direct access to the spice supply, and it would eventually drive European explorers on a dangerous quest to reach these coveted lands. The 15th century marked a turning point in the history of the spice trade, as European nations began to challenge the established monopoly on spices held by Arab and Venetian merchants. With the fall of Constantinople to the Ottomans in 1453, the overland trade routes were cut off, further fueling Europe's desire to find direct maritime routes to the east. Portugal was the first European power to break through. Under the sponsorship of Prince Henry the Navigator, Portuguese explorers began venturing down the west coast of Africa, eventually rounding the Cape of Good Hope. In 1498, Vasco da Gama became the first European to reach India by sea, opening a direct maritime route to the spice-rich regions of the Indian Ocean. This marked the beginning of Portugal's dominance in the spice trade. They established trading posts and fortified colonies along the African and Indian coasts, securing their place as the primary supplier of spices to Europe for much of the 16th century. By the early 17th century, Portugal's control over the spice trade began to wane, and other European powers sought to take their place. The Dutch and English were eager to challenge Portugal's dominance, leading to fierce competition on both the high seas and in the Spice Islands themselves. In 1602, the Dutch founded the Dutch East India Company, VOC, one of the world's first multinational corporations. The VOC quickly became a dominant force in the spice trade, using military might to seize control of key spice-producing islands in Southeast Asia. They established a near monopoly on the spice trade by driving out the Portuguese and consolidating control over nutmeg, cloves, and mace. The Dutch even went so far as to destroy spice trees on islands they did not control to ensure their monopoly remained intact. The British, through the British East India Company, also sought to carve out their own share of the spice trade. While they were less successful in dominating the Spice Islands, they focused their efforts on India, where they established a foothold in the lucrative pepper trade. Over time, as European tastes evolved, tea, coffee, and sugar became as important as the original spices, and the British would eventually dominate these new markets. The spice trade had profound effects on the world's political and economic landscape. The wealth generated by the spice trade helped finance European imperialism and contributed to the rise of global empires. Portugal's brief period of dominance was followed by the Dutch and British, who not only competed for control of the spice trade, but also established colonial empires in Asia and beyond. The competition for control of the spice trade also sparked numerous wars. The Dutch waged brutal campaigns in the Spice Islands to secure their monopoly, often employing violent tactics to suppress resistance from indigenous populations. Meanwhile, European powers fought naval battles in the Indian Ocean and the seas surrounding Southeast Asia, as control of sea routes became as important as control of the spice-producing regions themselves. By the 18th century, the significance of the spice trade began to decline as new commodities became more important in global trade. The development of European colonies in the Americas introduced sugar, tobacco, and cotton as valuable goods, and the spice trade lost some of its former glory. Moreover, European nations began to cultivate spices in their own colonies, breaking the monopoly of the Spice Islands. For example, the British successfully transplanted cinnamon trees to Sri Lanka and pepper vines to India, reducing their reliance on Southeast Asian sources. Nevertheless, the legacy of the spice trade endures. It played a crucial role in shaping the modern world by encouraging exploration, fostering global trade networks, and driving the expansion of European empires. The spice trade also marked the beginning of a truly global economy, as goods, ideas, and people moved across continents in ways previously unimaginable. The spice trade was far more than just the exchange of valuable commodities. It was a quest for wealth, power, and control that reshaped entire continents and societies. From the early days of Arab and Venetian traders to the age of European exploration and colonization, the desire for spices drove the course of history. It led to the rise and fall of empires, fostered cultural exchanges, and connected distant corners of the globe in a web of trade and conquest. Today, the legacy of the spice trade can still be seen in the culinary traditions, global trade networks, and historical narratives of exploration and empire.